I had to learn the hard way that all of us, like you mentioned at the very beginning, have some type of failure in our life. Now, maybe it's not, as grand, if we can use that word, as perhaps my very, very public failure, but it's all relative, right? Like people, whatever is your failure in life is important and big to you.
Let's talk about failure
Yeah.
and some of the components of your career that people might be listening and wanting to know how you've learned or what
Yeah.
you've learned or the hard realities of when athletes are incentivized to get the most out of their body. Sometimes things happen that aren't kosher and what that looks like. And so I don't want to get into the why of certain things, but for those who maybe don't know, do you want to give the 30
Yeah,
second
I don't have a
summary?
problem. Yeah, I don't have a problem. And it's not something that's right, like that is fun to bring up and talk about, but it gives my journey, my context, it gives it all context, right? So,
Sure.
if you've listened this far, you obviously know that I used to be an elite athlete, 5-time Olympian, 3 golds, 2 bronze back in 2000. After the 2000 games, there was a lot of news media about athletes and performance enhancing drugs, and my name got pulled into it. Well, fast forward a little bit, because there are a lot of podcasts and stories that have already dissected it, but to kind of put it in a nice little bow, I was invited by federal investigators to share my knowledge about a particular laboratory that was producing these performance enhancing drugs for athletes. And sitting in the conference room, realized at that moment that what I had been given was something that was in the media that was banned. And when I recognized what it was, I immediately lied about it. I lied about me ever taking it, which I had prior to the games, and held on to that lie for a number of years until it caught up with me generally. And I decided that I'm done with the lies, no matter what the ramifications and the consequences would be. And they were severe for me. I was sentenced to 6 months incarceration. I served my time and there was probation. But bigger and harder than that was that I gave back the medals. My reputation was tarnished. Millions of dollars were lost. And literally, I had to start at ground zero. To say that that was the failure in my world, that would be the easy part. But just dealing with the idea that in my heart, I know that without certain things happening, without like blinders that I had on at that time in regards to the circle that I kept of people, that things did not have to go like that. Like I would have been very successful. I would have won the medals. I would have most likely broken world records, right? And there are people that are listening that are like, but if you have followed my career from the first time I made the Olympic team at 15 to even before that, you know that my trajectory of success was going in that way. So I don't need to argue that point. People that know the sport and know running know that. So that's what's hard to accept, right? That it didn't have to go as planned, but it did. And dealing with a lot of stuff in the last 10, 15, 20 years, Jonathan, and knowing that everything in life happens for a reason, right? And how do you make the best of every situation? And so after all of this happened, I made the choice, Jonathan, to step back out of the spotlight. At that point, I had 3 very small children, and I made the decision to step away so that I can totally be present for them. And that would require me to like not be a part of sport or anything. I also found that people didn't really want to hear much that I had to say. They didn't trust what I had to say, and it goes hand in hand, right? Like you let so many people down. I disappointed people, and that is part of the consequence to it. And to gain people's trust back takes time. It takes a certain level of, hey, I did it. This is what I did. I apologize for it. I am not going to continue for the rest of my life to be in that space and to be apologizing. I've done it. But now moving forward, how am I making people's lives better based off of my experiences and based off of my failure? That brings us fast forward to like where I'm at now, Jonathan, is that I had to learn the hard way that all of us, like you mentioned at the very beginning, have some type of failure in our life. Now maybe it's not, as grand, if we can use that word, as perhaps my very, very public failure. But it's all relative, right? Like people, whatever is your failure in life is important and big to you. And maybe yours wasn't across every media outlet in the world for however many years, but in your world, I'm sure that it was massive. And that is where, again, we go back to this, that is where we relate, right? That is where I feel your pain. And I hope that you feel mine, right? On an even a bigger scale. And how can I use what I've learned and where I'm at now to teach people that it doesn't have to define you, right? Like, if anybody can come to that conclusion in this present day life, all right, I think that I have enough experience to say that it does not need to define you. You control your own narrative to say, hey, it happened, right? It happened, but I'm not staying there. And I'm going to use my experience to help other people not have to make necessarily certain poor choices, that your failure is not forever. Like it doesn't have to just keep going and going and going and going. Even if in interviews, Jonathan, I talk about it, right? That doesn't mean that my failure is still going on just because I talk about it. That's not the way that I see it. And it's not the feedback that I've gotten from the world since I've made the choice to come back out into the public. It's that, you know what? Wow, right? Like, okay, it happened, right? But she's using all of it to help people say, you know what? You do not have to stay stuck. Like, you don't have to stay there. There might be people in your family, in your world, in your business that say you need to stay there because of poor choices. There are going to be people all the time that say that. But if you start believing it, that's when you're going to stay there. If you say, you know what? I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to fight tooth and nail until doors start to open for me, Jonathan, until people want to hear what I have to say. And I know that they will, especially because I'm confident in what I deliver, in what I share. Are there doors still being shut? Sure. But now, as time goes on, are there doors that are being opened, wanting to hear my story and share my experience? Heck yeah.
What would you say to the people who might have those closed doors, but for some reason, they've tuned into this conversation, right? I know that Allison from Fast Women is going to listen to this. I know that Kara Goucher is going to listen to this. People who have been very outspoken in a variety of different ways about clean sport and failure and why we do what we do. What do you say to those people?
Well, the first thing that I share is you have to check your because I have a background in sport, Jonathan. All of my references are sport related. So I say you have to check your team, right? You have to check the people in your world. And that's hard to do sometimes. I think that's the first step in this. Are you surrounding yourself? And it's what we tell our kids. It's what, and I think a lot of adults don't embrace it. Like even as an adult, you have to surround yourself with like-minded people. And hopefully like-minded people are driven, confident, morally strong, people that will give it to you straight, Jonathan. Like when you are just blanking up, when you're just not making the right choices, you're not seeing clearly. You have people in your life that are not going to tiptoe around you because of something that you can do for them, Jonathan. They're going to say, Jonathan, I love you, man, right? But you need to just maybe look at it from this point of view. That's the first thing. You need to check your circle. That doesn't mean that your childhood friend that you've known since 7, that you smoked your first blunt with, that you never have to talk to them again, but you're not going to drop everything when they call because they're going to put you in a space that you don't need to be in. Anyways, that's a whole other. So first thing, check your team, check your accountability crew, make sure that it is solid. It doesn't need to be 20, 30 people. You could have an accountability team of 5 and they could be a mentor, whomever that is. But that's the first thing. You need to figure out and spend some hard time, Jonathan, figuring out who you are, why you made certain choices. And more importantly, moving forward, like how are you not going to make the same mistake, right? Like, and that's kind of the hard part, right? Like sitting down with yourself, like that could be, that could be ugly sometimes, but it's necessary and it takes time. And it's one of the many things that I did in my 10-year like silence in regards to the world, right? Like I was just like, okay, Marion, like what in your world puts you in a space where all of the red flags that were being like hurled your way, you disregarded them? Like why? And once you get to that, okay, then you start reframing, rebranding, figuring out like what is the next step? What can you do positively in this world that doesn't necessarily have to do with running fast from here to there, right? Because it's one of the things I share, Jonathan, and not to switch topics, I'll get back, but it's one of the things that I share with like current elite athletes, right? That your ability to be great in your sport of choice is limited to like less than 0.10% of your whole life, right? And there are many, many Olympic gold medalists. There are many world record holders. But what is going to set you apart is figuring out what you're going to do after sport that can globally impact the world. That's kind of what I had to do, like reframe, rebrand. I couldn't run, first of all, age wise, physically, I couldn't run as fast as I could, right? Like, and so you get to a point where I couldn't even compete in the sport that I love, and not allowing sport to define who I am, right? Like so many athletes, like I'm an athlete. Okay, well, what's going to happen when you're unable to be an athlete, right? Are you a philanthropist, right? Like, are you like, what else? What else are you going to do when your body says, no, no, no more? And so I'll go back to him and just share it again. Like, check your team, right? Check the people in your life that influence you the most. And do you need to let go of some people? You need to sit with yourself and figure out who you are, why you made certain choices, and moving forward, how do you want to impact the world? And then reframe, rebrand, figure out what makes you right now relevant in the world. Right? And it can't be your failure, right? Because that story gets old, right? And I'm going to tell you, like, I am, again, Jonathan, a prime example of if I was just holding on to the fact that I made such poor choices in sport, like there wouldn't be that many doors open for me to share my story right now, because the story has been told. It has been dissected. It is old news, really. Right? So why am I still getting the opportunity to share and to help people? It's because I have reframed, Jonathan, I have rebranded myself, and that I am not stuck there.